It's an early blues number from the Rolling Stones called Little Red Rooster, and I don't think that song's about a barnyard bird. The song going into the break, by the way, I forgot to mention that little jaunty romp was a new one by a loyal Coast listener, friend of the program, Robbie Williams, a guy who knows Tom, follows his work closely. The song is called Bruce Lee, from an album that went to #1 in the UK pretty much immediately. I'm getting a lot of messages, emails from people, all kinds of topics, but many of them just wanting to tell Tom DeLonge how much they love his music, claiming they own every album he ever put out. And that's every relative in my family under the age of 50 who's sending those messages. Hey, don't you guys have to go to work tomorrow? We will be opening up the phones in this segment. One or two things to cover first, though. Peter is sticking around with us. We'll be back to talk about God's man and war in just a moment. Man, the phone's filled up in pretty much the blink of an eye, so we'll go to them in just a moment. One other matter I wanted to ask Peter, in your studies of this, pulling all these threads together about the nature of this intelligence, whatever it is, wherever it's from, have you considered the idea of it being a mechanical or machine intelligence? I mean, we figure if we explored the universe, we might send robots or something to do it. A lot of people who have studied this topic, whose opinions I respect, have said that they think there are signs that maybe this is a mechanical intelligence, robotic, AI, something along those lines.
Certainly. The actual phenomenon itself that's observed may be mechanical, purely mechanical, but who sent them out there? You know, who was responsible for designing, engineering, and making these things and sending them to us? The machines are probably not strictly there to fly the craft and report back. They may have maybe programmed to do other things. So if they are machines, we're still in the same spot we were before. We don't know what the intentions are of the intelligence that created them and sent them, and we don't know what the capabilities are. So, we're stuck looking at the phenomenon still the same way, whether they're machines or organic beings or something else entirely. In the end, doesn't really affect the equation that much.
I'm not sure we know what they look like, do we, Tom? I mean, if they can appear in different shapes and forms at different times to different people, they could be anything.
Yeah, and you pretty much get everything from all the different witness accounts. I mean, they describe it in every single way, and that's what's scary. I mean, I think one of the other things that's scary about it too is what we do to countries on this planet. Like if you were to go to Syria or Iraq right now and you're meeting people that say they're your friend, but you don't know if they're Russian or if they're American or they're double agents, triple agents, and it's just the way we compete on a higher level to third world countries when we're toppling governments and doing all that kind of weird stuff. I think it's the same thing here. It's like, who do you trust and who's really who? I mean, one of the scarier things that came out of the past few decades of some of the bodies that were potentially retrieved was that in the back of the brain was a transmitter, and everything that this entity would see and do was transmitting somewhere else. So you got to think like, well, was it being controlled, or is it, what is this thing? It's some kind of biological robot just doing work for someone else that potentially doesn't even have any emotion, maybe doesn't even have a soul, and then here we are back to square one going, are these demons or are these aliens? What is this?
You were told directly, I know there's some sensitivities about the advisors, but you were told, and it's public, that we found a life form. That's the quote, right?
Potentially that was the quote, yes. But, we should probably put life forms, put an S at the end. But look, you don't need me to say that. I think people have been saying that for a very long time, and it's just sad that with all the evidence out there, people are still waiting for the president to say it before they believe it. It's just not it's not necessary.
And that's never going to happen.
I don't. Well, I wouldn't say never. I mean, but I think they've dug themselves into a pretty big hole. By dealing with it the way they had to deal with it. If they're going to come out and say, okay, guess what? We've been lying this entire time. We have something to tell you. There's no way to keep, everyone calm. I mean, there's just no way. You'll have all the big aerospace corporations suing each other for having more access than the other. It'll turn into it'll just become like a big kind of ego fest between who got what, who knew what, and the politicians would politicize the whole thing for show. Unless we can assume that everyone's going to be very, very mature and calm and
yeah.
not vilify anyone, right?
Yeah, that's pretty safe. Let's take some phone calls. People are screaming into their phones right now, I know. East of the Rockies, Mark in Baltimore. Good morning, Mark.
Thank you very much for taking my call. Mr. Knapp, I love your Sunday shows because you're all my favorite topic.
Well, thank you.
Also, I have tremendous respect for both your guests, Mr. DeLonge and the other guest. So here it is really quickly. The late Dr. Carl Sagan of Cornell University, the last book he published was entitled The Demon-Haunted World, and he tackled every different subject from all these things, the topics that have been discussed tonight. And he is known for that famous statement that there must be I'm paraphrasing, but he said there must be an equal ratio of claims to incontrovertible proof. So I have two questions. My first question is, in your upcoming 3 books / ancillary projects, are you going to be able to meet Dr. Sagan's standard? And question 2 is, during this fascinating interview tonight / this morning, many of Mr. Knapp's questions have kind of been left hanging and gone without any explanations. Are you scared of the government? And again, can you answer that question about meeting Mr. Sagan's standard? And I can take your answers off the air. Thank you.
Thanks.
The really good questions. The questions that I haven't answered is because I'm in a tough spot. There's a lot of things that I can't talk about. There's some things that I used to be able to talk about, and I maybe can't going forward. And there's some things I don't think it's appropriate to talk about. So but I do think that a lot of those things will be answered in the coming couple of years as we roll all this out. But back to, where's the proof? Are we going to have, extraordinary proof or extraordinary claims? I'm not the guy that's going to be able to hand you, or not you, but anybody, some kind of biological specimen on a table or a flying saucer. I'm not going to be able to do that. But, look at the things that have already existed. There's thousands of hours of tapes of UFOs in the sky, from triangles to disks to balls of light. There's Dr. Roger Lear had between 10 and 15 implants that he took out of people on video during the surgeries and after, and went around lecturing about them. So those things were examined, and it was nanotechnology, and it had whatever elements in it. So you have David Jacobs going around and has over 1,000 cases of people that are having abduction reports. John Mack from Harvard, he was the head of psychiatry in the medical division over there at Harvard Medical School, and he wrote all the books. So it's like, I don't need to bring forth the evidence; it's already there. But I really wish I could. I really wish I could somehow come out and do it. But one of the reasons I got as far as I did is I just leapfrogged all the other, ufologists that are just running around in circles chasing their tail on this stuff. And some of them are doing incredible work, so I'm not trying to minimize their efforts. But I just said, look, I just want to get to the root of the matter. I just want the answers. And if you trust me, I will trust you. And this is how I intend to do it. And it took a long time, but that I ended up where I'm at because of it.
Sort of boils down to what is proof. It's in the eye of the beholder. The kinds of records and experiences that Peter writes about in this book. Does that constitute a level of evidence? The lights in the sky. Some people would say that's not evidence. They won't be convinced, I guess, until the Roswell wreckage, is put out on the lawn of the White House. Peter, you'd agree it depends on what you think proof is.
Well, sure. But I think that we use different standards of proof in different types of human endeavor. So there's the proof that's acceptable to one group may match what's acceptable to another. For instance, in a court of law, I think that we have more than enough evidence to affirm the reality of the phenomenon in a court of law, like beyond reasonable doubt. Sometimes you'll have a circumstantial case, and maybe what we have here is a circumstantial case. We don't have the body, as Tom mentioned. We're not going to produce, a body. I don't think we are. Who knows? But at this moment, we don't have one. So we're not going to produce a body. That doesn't mean the body didn't exist. In a court of law, you can have a circumstantial case with no body present, but with enough circumstantial evidence that can convict somebody of murder. So it depends on what your standards of proof are, and how a reasonable person would analyze the kind of proof and the kind of evidence that we have. That's why I've become a believer in the phenomenon, although I have not seen it myself, and I don't think that it's necessary for everyone to have seen a UFO before they understand that this is a genuine phenomenon that actually exists, because there's overwhelming amounts of eyewitness testimony, videotapes, et cetera, et cetera. As I said, radar traces, everything, military statements that have been made since the 1950s, at least, starting with 1952 and the July 52 overflights of Washington. All of these official statements, when you start putting everything together, you are coming up with evidence and with proof. It's just that nobody has put their imprimatur on it and stamped it and said, okay, where do we go from here? I think we're doing that. I think we're saying, where do we go from here? We're comfortable with the kind of evidence that's already been presented in all of those thousands of documents, the declassified documents from FBI, CIA, NSA, and everybody else, plus all the eyewitness testimony, all the research done by respected academics and other types of scholars in this field. So we're basing our premise on this.
Yeah, you guys start with the premise that the point has already been proven. You're moving beyond it. Tom, the second part of Mark's question was about whether you're scared of the government. Does it ever occur to you that maybe you know too much, that you could become a liability at some point?
It has occurred to me, and I've been told more than I think 4 different times, to be very careful and to not do certain things and not say certain things. And none of it was because of a threat. It was just like, I was told very specifically, you have a compilation problem. And I said, well, what's that? And they said, you've been able to compile more than anybody has because of the amount of people on your team, and so that I take all this very seriously, and I take this opportunity seriously. But I'm a big believer, and I really am, truthfully, and I'm not just saying this. I'm a big believer in what we have done as a country and what our government has done with this issue. It's ballsy, it's really, really ballsy, and I don't know how else to put it, because, I liken it to like somebody pulls up to your house in a big, giant armored tank, and you walk out with a stick, and you're like, how am I going to fight this tank? They're going to blow up my entire house, and my whole family could die. So at that moment, you would do whatever it takes. And that's the way I look at a very small group of people that took on this burden for the entire world, so we can go through our daily lives and think that we're in control and go to work and have our families and go to baseball games in the afternoon during the summertime, and we just had no idea that other people just were probably losing their marriages, not talking to their kids, up all night, becoming alcoholics, trying to deal with something. I mean, I was just listening to something about Kissinger, that after he got involved with this subject matter, he just became a recluse and got a divorce and wouldn't talk to anybody. He was just feverishly working on something for a long period of time. And this is not something that was told to me. This is just research stuff that I was doing on my own and in conversations I was having with other people. But to me, I really think that's probably exactly how it went down with a small group of people, just so we can have ordinary lives.
West of the Rockies, Wayne in Tacoma. Good morning, Wayne.
Good morning. Yes, as a believer, I can say that I am a son of God. And you mentioned that earlier, the sons of God, and being one of the sons of God. There's some biblical things that you brought up tonight. For instance, the Sumerian text that says that man was formed out of clay. Well, that's basically what Genesis says, that God, in his own image, formed the dust of the earth, or dirt, probably with water in it, into his shape and breathed life into it, and that became man. And if I'd like to see what we can agree upon here.
Well, Peter writes about that.
Yes. For instance,
let's let Peter wade into it, because we got a whole bunch of folks on the phone. So let's let him tackle that one.
Yeah, sure. I think that these two stories are intimately related. I mean, I think that the version we have in Genesis came, of course, later than the Sumerian version, but possibly because of the exile into Babylon by the Jews after the destruction of the first temple, they may have heard, some of these stories, maybe incorporated it into Genesis, or maybe these are two completely separate groups talking about exactly the same event.
Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate it. First-time caller Aaron in Myrtle Beach. Aaron, welcome to the program.
Yes, how are you doing? It's nice to meet you guys. I have a two-part question. The first part, throughout history, it's been written certain battles, like Alexander the Great, there were gleaming shields that had lights that knocked down city walls. Of course, Constantine and Columbus selling. All these different things happen to change the course of history, or do you believe that these things happened by a certain entity to change the course of history? And my second part would be, do you believe it's still happening? I know you spoke on the nuclear weapons, and do you believe it's going to happen in the future to change civilization?
Tom, we got about 40 seconds before the break.
The answer is yes. I think that there have been events throughout time to change the course of civilization on purpose. Absolutely. Matter of fact, I even think that certain crashes happened before World War II because these beings have the ability to travel through time, and they all started showing up right before that war, probably to give technology to differing sides. So I think it's going on today. I think it went on 70 years ago, and I think it went on long before that, and I think it will continue to go on long into the future.
Aaron, thank you for the call. We'll go back to the phones in just a couple of minutes. Peter, you want to stick around with us?
Sure. No problem.
All right. Well, the phones are pretty much full. Tom DeLonge and Peter Levenda here talking about Gods, Man, and War, part of the Volume 1 of the Secret Machines Project. We'll be right back. Nirvana, take us into the break. That's Paul McCartney. It's called Rinse the Raindrops, and Extended Jam. Really gets going a couple of minutes into that song. We're talking with Tom DeLonge and Peter Levenda about Gods, Man, and War, Secret Machines Project, an official investigation of the UFO phenomenon that goes much beyond our idea about flying saucers. A lot of folks on the phones. We'll get to as many of your calls as we can in just a moment in our final segment of Coast to Coast AM. Tom, a quick question before we go back to the phones. I would think one of the difficulties you deal with is tempering expectations, that you tell people what you're doing, that you have this cadre of advisors who are insiders who are sharing the big picture with you, and they want to know immediately. They don't want to wait 3 years or 5 years or whatever. They want to know now, and they get angry about it if you're not willing to just spill all the secrets of the universe pretty much on the spot.
Yeah, no, I get it. I absolutely get it. It's just, this project is, it's a long-term project, and it has kind of like I said earlier, a perpetual mechanism to it, and that's part of some of the stuff that'll be coming out here shortly in the future, and explaining that more then. But people just have to bear with me and bear with the process. But I think they're going to be very happy. Very happy, and just give me a few weeks to get this thing all in line for the conversation. So I think it's worth the wait.
A few weeks? Wow. All right. We'll go back to the
Well,
phones.
I did say, just to be clear, like it's good. It's a few weeks, meaning kind of what I said before. It's in the next 60 to 90 days ish. There'll be more clarity.
You've been sort of, I don't want to say recluse, but since the events of last year, you sort of haven't been out there as much until tonight. Are you? Is this a new phase for you?
It's because I'm working extraordinarily hard on something, and again, that's all part of the announcement that's going to be coming up. I've just been absolutely swamped, and but it's exciting. It's just it's exhausting at the same time, but it's a big deal.
We'll go to Thomas in La Jolla on the wild card line. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, George. Thank you for taking my call. Magnificent interview. Thank you, Peter and Tom, for everything that you're doing. Peter, I enjoyed your book on Kabbalah and Chinese Taoism many years ago.
Oh, thank you.
And my question is, Peter, you asked the question, what are they protecting? And Tom, you cited Genesis 6. But there's another chapter in Genesis, and that's Genesis 3. Genesis 3 speaks about the tree of life. You eat of the paraphrase, you eat of the extraterrestrial tree of life, and you are granted immortality, biological immortality. And my question is that what they are protecting? That we're not talking about secret machines or higher technology, hardware, so to speak. We're talking about superior bioengineering that could grant not only life extension, but literally add thousands of years to your life, biological immortality, as suggested in Genesis 3. That's my question for both of you.
Well, Peter, do you want me to go? I think that absolutely. I do believe that genetics and biology play a major role in all of this in so many ways, and just trust me on that. But I know if the Bible is referring specifically to that. I would not be the guy to answer that. That's why, Peter, maybe you can shine on the texts and your interpretation of that.
Yeah, well, you had the situation, which is very interesting about Genesis 3, because the serpent is telling Eve that if you eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you'll become as gods, right? So we have that idea again, you shall be as gods, Elohim. So the whole Bene Elohim concept that we found in Genesis 6 is anticipated, the sons of God and the daughters of men. There's no physical reason, there's no genetic reason, really, why we shouldn't live for thousands of years. What happens is the genes start turning off at a certain point because basically they think we're dying or that we're dead. They don't want us to keep using resources. The genes want to live forever. The genetic code is immortal. I mean, we can take the genetic code out of any one of our cells, and we're going to find genetic material that goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? It's still there. The genes want to be immortal. They don't need the bodies for that, though. They just need the bodies to perpetuate the genes and to modify them and add extra genetic material. I mean, that's what happens on this planet. So the genetic code itself is already immortal. It's tens of thousands, it's millions of years old. It's from the first time we had genetic material on this planet, for instance. So it's already immortal. It's the bodies themselves that die off. And what we're trying to do as humans when we try to go against that, we're trying to really fight against that genetic material by trying to give immortality to the body that we're in at this moment, to live forever, to have our consciousness uninterrupted is really what the goal is. I think we'd be happy to switch bodies or to get new ones if the old one wears out, as long as we could maintain our consciousness undisturbed from one incarnation, let's say, to another. And isn't that really the goal? The goal is to maintain that stream of consciousness that goes, from generation to generation to generation. That's what we don't have now. And I think there's a message encoded in Genesis about that. And I think it's a similar message in other religions as well.
Tom, you've read material in the UFO realm about the idea that aliens, if that's what we call them, are here to harvest souls, that we have something they don't have, something along those lines. Any indication from your folks about what it is that we have that they don't, or what it is they need from us on an ongoing basis?
Yes, there has been conversations about that kind of stuff, not about souls. I believe that there's got to be something really unique about the human race that other races probably don't have. And that makes me think about the soul. I sometimes wonder if, a lot of the grays that we see out there are artificial intelligence, AI. They were created, they were cloned, and maybe they don't have souls. Maybe that's what the Bible was talking about, where there's a race that hates mankind and jealous of God's love for man, but maybe that has to do with the fact that when we die, our soul is eternal. These are things that I think, and this is just me pondering. But when it comes down to other things that they may want, there has been conversations about that stuff, but I'm not going to get into it here.
Okay, Blair in Sedona on the wild card line. Hi, Blair. Good morning.
Actually, lobbied friend Tom Dongo a couple of weeks ago to appear on your show. Unfortunately, he didn't.
Yeah.
But my question's for Mr. DeLonge. Can you share a specific data point from your research that swayed Jacques Vallée to write your foreword? Was it a specific data point, like Mr. Lavenda talks about, of our true nature?
Yeah, that's a good question. There wasn't a specific data point. Jacques Vallée is a part of a group of people that have far-reaching connections and that are of pretty great importance. And I have a lot of connections with some of those same people. And I think through the many meetings and through really getting to know everybody's intentions are aligned in the same way, he was happy to write the foreword. Now, I must say he wrote the foreword 99.9% of the more because he really liked Peter's writing, and he liked that Peter took a very specific stance that wasn't echoing kind of the more normal mainstream UFO books that are out there that frankly Jacques won't subscribe to because he's a scientist. So as Peter being a scholar, that really resonated with Jacques. And I definitely don't want to speak for Jacques, but I know that he's fond of me and he's supportive of my project, but he is a scientist and he is waiting for very specific data for him to ever make a conclusion on what this all is. So I think him and I differ in that respect, but he didn't have the experiences that I have had over the past year and a half with the people I've had them with. So, it's just, two different routes.
He didn't have the experience, but he believes that you are telling the truth, and
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, like after the WikiLeaks thing and all that kind of stuff, I think people can understand what's going on a bit.
And Peter, a lot of what you wrote is consistent with Jacques' worldview of these topics.
Yeah, I think so. I kind of like to take the scientific and skeptical point of view when it comes to a lot of the literature that's around on the phenomenon. I like to step back from that and take a different approach. And I think in doing that, I kind of began to parallel Jacques Vallée's approach as well, which is, cautious. But it's not the position of someone who is out to debunk, for the sake of debunking. I think Jacques Vallée has a very serious approach to this. He understands that this is a serious subject, that it deserves the kind of attention that it should get, but he wants to treat it in a more logical, in a logical, scientific way. And I kind of resonate with that a great deal. So I think we kind of ran along in the same lines. I wasn't trying to emulate Jacques Vallée's ideas or theories or certainly his writing style in writing God's Secret Machines Gods, but I think that he was kind of an inspiration where let's do this the right way. Let's be cautious, let's be careful, but let's present the evidence and see where it takes us.
East of the Rockies, Chuck in Toledo. Good morning, Chuck.
Hi. Listen, I wanted to know, what do you think about Antarctica? I've heard that there was...
Hey, Chuck, we're having a hard time hearing you. Have you moved the phone?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've heard that there were pyramids built on the Antarctic before there was ice there. I know that many countries have scientific bases there, and that I've also heard that the Germans had went there in the hunt for Hitler. He didn't go to states of South America, that he went down there.
All right, let me finish Chuck's question for him. Any indication that there are pyramids Antarctica?
I can say, that I've been following a bit of that story as well. I happen to believe Antarctica is a very important place for a variety of reasons. It's hard to say with that pyramid story. I mean, everyone's floating around this idea that there's something really important going on down there right now, but there's also been one site in particular on the web that has been faking UFO reports, and I think they had something to do with the pyramid, specifically the picture that everyone's referring to. But I could be wrong, but I do know that they have been caught, and it was written about in a major piece of journalism, actually, just recently. It was sent to me by somebody that I really respect. So it's hard to say what's exactly going on down there, but I think it plays a major role with this subject, and I wouldn't be surprised, though, if there was. I think there's ancient structures everywhere underneath the water, buried on all the continents, and it would not surprise me at all.
Tom, let me ask you this. The idea of disinformation comes up all the time in the UFO field. I'm sure you have to deal with it pretty much every day. The idea that you are being led down a path, fed disinformation. Talk to me about that, how you guard against it, but also how your advisors guard against it. I mean, this phenomenon that you and Peter are talking about has been around a long time, is pretty good at manipulating humans and figuring out how to get its way.
Yeah, for me specifically, I'm very well read on this subject, so I had a very extensive knowledge on this subject when I went into it. So I used to tell myself over and over again that or I would prepare myself if they were going to lie to me, or if someone's going to lie to me, or they're going to use me, how I would try to think through ways I would find that out in the conversations, or I would be able to catch on to the disinformation if it was being given to me. So I went in prepared for that. I was defensive in the back of my mind, and that's the absolute truth. But when I started hearing everything lining up exactly with what I thought, now there's new stuff for sure. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I came to the conclusion long before I met anybody that this phenomenon is not good, that this phenomenon is complex, that this phenomenon is responsible for the divisions of mankind, and then one must conclude that the reason for the secrecy is because we've been preparing to deal with it this entire time and have been dealing with it, but it's been a massive undertaking. And when I started, getting the advice back towards me, and it lined up exactly with that, I had no reason to believe I was being used. It was the same conclusions that I already came to. And keep in mind, I didn't, it was never like I was really giving all of my knowledge to other people. It was more of a one-way street.
Peter, anything to add to that? Let me go, Tom, with you before you leave. the idea that maybe your advisors, are being disinformed by a manipulative, an intelligence that has got its way for a long time.
Are you asking me, George?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, talk about if we're talking in terms of the phenomenon. Yes, I think I remember being in one conversation. This person was looking down and dealing with, like, I think they were pulling their keys out of their pocket or something. We were sitting at a table, and I remember asking, if this phenomenon can manipulate and play with the minds of man, then I said, well, the few people that have to deal with this directly and bear the brunt of it for the entire world, I said, can we assume that their minds can be played with? And before I could end the sentence, he goes, yes, and doesn't even look up from his keys. Just yes, cuts me off. And that scared me, because it's not like all of a sudden we have a few human beings that are just like super powerful and they're superheroes. They're not. They're just like you and I, but they've worked their way up the ladder to, unfortunately, be responsible for this stuff, and they're no different than you and I. And I just think it's admirable, and it's a scary situation to be in for those guys.
Well, it is scary stuff. The book is scary. Gods, Man, War. This is Gods, Volume 1 of the Secret Machines Project. Tom DeLonge, Peter Levenda, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah, and thanks for staying on, Peter. I know it's what is it? It's basically tomorrow for you right now, I think.
It's about 5 o'clock in the morning, yeah.
You can call in late. Thank you, guys. No, appreciate it. Thanks also to my colleagues there at Coast, Nathan Staten, Donna Walker, Dan Galante, our webmaster tonight, Lex Lonehood, and our producer, Chris Boros. George Norrie is back tomorrow. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Good night, everyone.